which will be the first sector that can disrupt with the DeFi technology?
Financial services. It's already being disrupted. It's at more than $1 trillion. Lamborghini, the luxury car maker, is using NFTs in order to certify components of the car. Given the premium nature, you could know whether the component is original or not. Similarly, as recent as very recently, Reliance General Insurance, based out of India, has made an initiative to accept central bank digital currency as a e-rupee payment for premiums. Exploratory testing is key. Leveraging ecosystem tools would definitely help. So there are broadly four categorizations currently that we view in the industry. One is the well-known crypto assets. The another form of implementation which governments are currently working is central bank digital currencies. In decentralized finance, the core underlying architecture is a peer-to-peer communication, whereas in centralized we are talking about client-server kind of architecture. So whenever these digital assets are put onto the blockchain, we call the process a minting process. So at a high level, on the right-hand side, you could see various layers. So the top layer being the user access layer, where typically D apps and web app, mobile app, you could view them. Typically, end customers interact with them. Followed by a function layer where typically smart contracts gets executed. I think as a testers, we need to focus on understand this ecosystem, because the ecosystem is evolving, meaning each blockchain has their own standards.
Hi everyone, welcome to another session. And this session is quite interesting one because the topic is a very different and unique topic. Though all of the topics of today are unique, but still, this is one of my favorite ones. So today's session, the next session that we are having, is on digital assets, decentralized finance, and the future of testing. This session is being taken by Rakesh Lokireddy, head blockchain COE at Qualitest. To tell a little bit about Rakesh, Rakesh is a career tester with a passion for emerging technologies and its impact on existing business processes. In his current role, he leads blockchain COE at Qualitest and is responsible for research and development efforts. He has In the past, he has led testing teams for fast growing firms and enterprises. I would love to call him up on the stage to share his knowledge on the topic of decentralized finance. Hi, Rakesh.
Hey, hi Vanshika, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you.
Hey, good morning, good evening everyone. Quick intro. My name is Rakesh Lokireddy. I lead the blockchain center of excellence for Qualitest for the India region. So today, in my day-to-day role, I deal with a lot of research as well as talking to our customers, specifically in the area of digital assets, DeFi, blockchain, track and trace, and few other use cases. Today, I will try to spend next 30 minutes trying to share um, some of the understandings of these areas which are still emerging, and what could that mean to testing as a community, and what are some of the learnings that we had. How can we take it forward together to kind of bring in quality engineering practices into this area. So I tried to divide this into four sections. One is basic understanding of digital assets and decentralized finance, and then dwell deep into difference between what we have currently today as a centralized finance, and then how decentralized finance is evolving. We'll look at a few use cases, how different layers of blockchain helps or enables, uh, enables digital assets and DeFi, coming into the forefront of the use cases. And then we are going to look at how to engineering quality into some of these use case implementations. So, a lot of these technologies are emerging at a very fast pace. But I think it is very important for us to take a pause and look at our history to understand and appreciate better about how the technology is kind of transforming industries and the sector landscape. So if we briefly look at the history of an asset and as in the form of money, uh, the good old days where we have started off with physical form. So when we were kids, our grandparents sometimes rewards us with a coin, a rupee slash coin. I still remember those days when we do good deeds, we get rewarded with a physical, coin or a rupee note. So the money was entirely in the physical form. So when we want to do some operations on that with respect to financial institutions, we had to walk into a branch, and then we progressed into the digital form, wherein the current form of the financial services and the banking has been digitized, and then however, the information with respect to each bank or each financial institution is siloed. So they own their own information. So they have. What does that mean is it brings in additional costs and process delays with respect to reconciliation. So think about a simple use case like a check deposit. Typically, it takes a day, in depending on the country where we are operating, in order to for the check to be redeemed and so forth. So the future form that where the industry is transforming towards is tokenized form, wherein we are taking the next step into the digitization, and then we are also getting onto a single network. So some of the topics we are going to talk in the next few slides are going to enable us move towards that side, wherein um, the transaction that we do in the financial world can be executed within the network, as well as the same transaction successfully executes within matter of time instead of waiting for a longer time. So that is where we are moving, and tokenization is one of the important concepts there. So this is a brief history of where we were, where we are currently, and where we are moving towards. Now, if you look at what digital assets are, if you think of any thing that can be stored digitally, that can be identifiable, and it has certain value, it is typically called as a digital asset. So there are broadly four categorizations currently that we view in the industry. One is the well-known crypto assets, wherein the value is stored in the form of medium of exchange as currency. And then typical use cases here includes like investments. There are organizations and individual retail investors investing into cryptos, and then kind of it is also heavily used in the form of forex, cross-border payments. Um, the another form of implementation which governments are currently working is central bank digital currencies. Again, the current crypto ecosystem is outside, is a public ecosystem, so it is driven by entire public networks. Whereas the central banks are now getting towards creating central bank digital currencies called CBDCs. So if you're based out of India, there is a lot of discussion happening in this area. Europe is heavily discussing, similar to US. All the large banks are currently piloting on some of those use cases. The third type of digital asset is NFT, non-fungible token, as opposed to non-functional testing, which we typically use in our testing community. So non-fungible tokens, you can think of them as a unique digital item that can be tokenized and given to an individual user as individual user. Individual user can be assigned as a ownership to it. You can think about it this way, right? A very simple example could be the session that we are currently recording. We could kind of capsule this session and then create an NFT, so that the NFT could be used to give access to a very specific set of people, either as a customer experience, or as a nuggets, or as a token of appreciation and so forth. So another some of the other use cases includes the very the most spoken about things in gaming and metaverses, avatars. So NFTs are typically used to identify the ownership or record the ownership of these virtual items like games and avatars. The fourth type includes security tokens. These are primarily used to bring physical items into the digital world. For example, real estate, property and plant. Now, the difference between NFTs and security tokens primarily being NFTs are unique, whereas security tokens can be fractionalized. So, for example, we could take one stock equity and then fractionalize it so that a stock that is worth like $20,000 or something like that could be fractionalized, and you can buy it at a fractional rate too, the fractional component of the stock too. Similarly, if there is a large apartment which we could digitize individual flat slash room, so it could be fractionalized to that extent to kind of uh, um, uh, do financial transactions on top of it. So once we have these digital assets, the primary use cases are to use them as a investment vehicles in the form of it could be as simple as letting it out on rent, or it could be as to a complex as use it to take mortgage out of it and then use the mortgage to do some other things and so forth. So a plethora of things get open. That is where we enter into the realm of decentralized finance. So if you look at decentralized finance, um, everything today that we are looking with respect to financial services or banks, they are centralized. You can think of decentralized finance doing everything what we are doing with our banking today, but if you take away the bank as a custodian and replace that with potentially blockchain, while still banks slash regulators or central banks still playing a role in that particular network, then we are looking at decentralized finance as a concept. You could still have an account, you could still do save money, you could still save do transfers, you could receive money, you could take a loan, mortgage, you could get interest paid on top of whatever the balances that you have, so forth. So it's pretty much similar to what a traditional banking is. So a nice image that consensus has put together with respect to differentiating centralized as well as decentralized is this. So if I just take, for example, an example of a payment. So if you want to send a payment today, you typically rely on Visa, Master, and they all rely on Swift payments gateway. Any time there is a challenge with one of your payment gateway servers, then it's as good as we are unable to do the transaction. Whereas instead in decentralized finance, the core underlying architecture is a peer-to-peer communication, whereas in centralized we are talking about client server kind of architecture. So given the p2p nature of the architecture, peer-to-peer nature of the architecture, every system or a node on the network can act as both client and server. So that is where the dependency of an individual player or an individual organization bringing down the network becomes very minimal, possibility of that happening in decentralized finance. So this, at a high level, the difference between centralized and decentralized. So we have seen digital assets like cryptos, CBDCs, stable coins, NFTs. Typically, these get stored in what we call as a wallets, right? So some of the wallets include, like you must have heard of Coinbase, MetaMask, primarily for institutions. And once we have these digital assets put into our wallets, we could use them across different use cases. For example, we could put them into a marketplace in order to sell them, or put it into a decentralized exchange to trade them with a different type of crypto or a different type of NFT. We could use a decentralized finance concept in order to invest those cryptos or invest those NFTs. And then several other possibilities exist. We could use NFTs to unlock, next layer within the game. We could use the same NFT to do several other things. Some of the examples here include, large organizations like JP Morgan. They have tokenized, the gold bars, and they are using them in cross-border payments too. So Coca-Cola, for example, has auctioned its 1956 model vending machine NFT and then they are using the proceedings of that to benefit a special Olympics. Lamborghini, the luxury car maker, is using NFTs in order to certify components of the car. Given the premium nature, you could know whether the component is original or not. Similarly, as recent as very recently, Reliance General Insurance, based out of India, has made an initiative to accept central bank digital currency as a e-rupee payment for premiums. Another interesting use case, especially in the media and entertainment world, is Spotify has now rolled out, token-enabled playlists, meaning for the select set of users, they are going to drop NFTs, and then the NFTs would open up specific, audio on the Spotify. So this could be very interesting use cases, because then the future of how they release music could entirely change with respect to the current subscription models. Another interesting use case that caught our attention is airline tickets. As we know today, once purchased, we have to use them because we enter all the details, and then there is no way we can only cancel or amend them. It cannot be transferred to an individual. So airlines are now coming up with different models. Argentinian Airlines now issues every ticket as an NFT. So it doesn't that doesn't so an interesting use case that can be built on top of it in a decentralized finance world could be to actually take this token and then purchase it for Christmas, or some summer holiday break way ahead of the schedule, and then as we get closer, trade it in the market for a higher price. So this could be a new alternative choice of investment. So three reasons why there's a adoption has been increasing in the last few years for digital assets. One, digital assets is being looked at as a unlocking value out of some of the physical assets that we have today. So during the pandemic, an interesting use case is during the pandemic, Sootbase is 50-year or more older organization which does auctioning of arts, headquartered out of London. So during this pandemic, given that there was no physical presence, they have choose to use metaverse and then auction digital art through the metaverse. So you could, as good as there is a very premier store in London for Sootbase. So when you walk into the metaverse, it's as good as you're walking inside those stores, and then you could view digital art, click on them to understand the description about them, and then you can participate in the auction too, and own that specific digital art and use it tomorrow. So once the digital art's value is unlocked, store the digital art, use it tomorrow on marketplace in order to kind of as an alternative investment strategy. So this is quite popular within the financial areas too. And third, where there are process and efficiency challenges, like we have seen for reconciliation, typically it takes time. So there is a process efficiency that can be brought into picture. If you look at track and trace, for example, how the food gets delivered right from the farmer all the way to distributors, manufacturers, distributors, and then to the shelf, and we consume. If you look at wine produced in those areas, so there are all these plethora of industries where we could bring in process efficiencies. So quick takeaways: one, primarily used to unlock the value; two, as an alternative investments; three, in order to improve process efficiencies. So the next question could come up is, how do I know how we can trust these digital assets? What if someone is trying to take me for a ride? So that is where blockchain comes into picture. The technology of blockchain comes into picture that securely records the information. And then typically the information is recorded on the network. So everyone participating in the network has a copy of that database. So the copy is duplicated, as opposed to typical thought process of having a single master copy of database in a peer-to-peer network. We are looking at duplicating the database across the system. Next, the database is of append-only nature. So once the information that goes in cannot be changed, but we can add new information on top of it, meaning the change of owners can be added on top of it. We have a database, we have a network who knows about the current state of the database. and we know there is a change of ownership, consensus kicks in to validate if the current owner is what the new owner is actually the real truth. And then consensus is a process of agreeing across all the players in the network. So there are protocols that are used, which typically happens automatically. And then a new blocks gets created. The transaction gets added into the blockchain. So whenever these digital assets are put onto the blockchain, we call the process a minting process. So at a high level on the right hand side, you could see various layers. So the top layer being the user access layer, where typically D apps and web app, mobile app, you could view them. Typically, end customers interact with them. Followed by a function layer, where typically smart contracts gets executed. And smart contracts is one of the key aspects, components of the entire blockchain ecosystem. You can think of smart contracts as a piece of code that can execute conditions of an agreement. So those can be very uh, um, legal binding. So an example of that could be a transfer of a digital asset, transfer of ownership of a digital asset from one person to other person, right? Similarly, transfer of ownership of a property from one person to other person. So these are two different examples, and it could be as powerful as them. Then we have layer one, layer two blockchains. This is where consensus protocols or identity based protocols like MPC or Kadimilla, gossip kind of protocols gets executed in order to keep the integrity of the blockchain. So two things here just I wanted to call out is smart contracts is an important piece that we as a testers need to be aware of, and that needs to be thoroughly tested. And then ensuring that the consensus as well as the D apps can work across all the blockchain networks are the key components. So what we have seen, just a quick recap, what we have seen so far is we try to get a view of what digital assets are, how decentralized finance leverages the existing digital assets to create new business models or act as an alternative investment channels. And for these two, in order to know the authenticity of the data, we looked at what blockchain is all about and how they help. Blockchain as a technology can help, enable digital assets kind of, ecosystem. Now, from a pure testing perspective, right? I think we need to strive towards, engineering quality right at the early stage. So we thought of three different areas. I wanted to focus on three different areas. One is, I think as a testers, we need to focus on understand this ecosystem, because the ecosystem is evolving, meaning each blockchain has their own standards. For example, if I take Ethereum as an example, Ethereum has its own standards, ERC20 tokens, and few other tokens standards that it has that are guidelines to build applications on top of Ethereum. Solana has its own. Bitcoin has its own. And then most importantly, for from a testing perspective, so far we have been dealing with applications outside the blockchain network specifically, which are client server mode. This is a peer-to-peer architectural node. What are the different scenarios that we need to think of when it comes to peer-to-peer network? Because the fundamental difference being in a client server, assuming that while we still have distributed networks, if client or a server or the servers goes down or the connection between them goes down, the application breaks. Whereas in P2B, the concept is even if one of the nodes goes down, we still have other nodes. How should the system behave in those scenarios? Those kind of scenarios we need to give a food for thought, and then we need to consider them into our testing criteria. And then most importantly, the nature of business within digital assets and decentralized finance are of that the smart contracts that are written on typically on a public blockchain like Ethereum are available for people to review, available outside the organization, available for entire public to review. So any errors within those smart contracts, they could be leveraged for negative consequences. So Couple of examples, is that there is a recurrency issue, wherein kind of we can do a transaction, and then before the transaction gets executed on the network, hackers could retry the same transaction again. So what does that mean is, before the transaction gets settled, there are multiple transactions that are being initiated, and then the resultant of that is it could potentially drain the wallet, right? So now the cost of these errors, this is one scenario. The another scenario is we have seen within the market, um, an error, a spelling error within the smart contract meant that approximately $40 million worth of digital assets are locked, which can never be opened because the database is of that nature. So sometimes businesses could lead to total loss too. So it is important to understand the ecosystem. And then with respect to planning and bringing in quality engineering into our practice, I think what we also need to look at is the blockchain as a technology enables these digital assets and acts as a governance. So trust is a key factor there. If we don't trust the network, then business cannot survive in those scenarios. So the integrity of the blockchain, meaning if there is in accounting concepts, there is a view that a dollar can be spent only kind of one time. There could be only one kind of dollar, so it cannot be double spent. It could be spent only once. $1 cannot be spent twice, leading to $2. So the integrity of blockchain is important. So we need to consider test scenarios, ensuring that those are taken care. And then we need to bring testing right at the early stages. If you focus on all the different 3 to 4 layers, there is different views with respect to are there 3 layers in the layers across the technology architecture, or are there 4 or 5? But either way, I think depending on the architecture that is under test, we need to focus on all layers. That will give us edge case scenarios. When we are picking our testing team for the project, I think it is relatively important to look at people who have at least basic business domain, but good critical thinkers, and then they do have ecosystem knowledge. The reason being, when we are looking at test environments within the system, we are testing with public test environments, integrating with public test environment, assuming this is a public blockchain that we are using to deploy our digital assets. And then the crypto, cryptocurrencies, the smart contracts gets typically deployed into these environments in order to test. So it is important that we work along with the ecosystem. So a simple example there could be, if we need to have certain digital assets like crypto available in our wallet to do some testing, then it is the community that gives us, because there is only a finite amount of crypto that is there in production, as well as blockchain test networks. So it is very important to that. Another angle could be another angle to look at is test data. So any data that we are pushing in is actually immutable, so it cannot be changed. We had a lot more control when we had the centralized version. Now it is decentralized version, so and it cannot be changed. So it is important to look at these parameters while putting together our test planning and strategy. And most importantly, I think the space is still evolving. I think we should be ready to experiment. There are standards are still being developed. They are evolving right from World Bank all the way to various forums. Linux open source forums are working on defining various standards, but it's still evolving. Exploratory testing is key. Leveraging ecosystem tools would definitely help. So these are a few of the thoughts with respect to how we can integrate quality into the use cases. That brings me to end of my thoughts that I wanted to share with you. If you have any questions,
Hi, Rakesh. So we have few questions. We'll take two of them because we are already running ahead of the schedule.
Mhm.
So I'll just share the questions. The first question with the most votes we have is, how does the education loans adopt the digital assets? Can we get the use case scenario?
Um, can you repeat the? Okay, I can read it here probably. How does the education loans adopt the digital assets? Can we get a? used scenario. Education loans or education certificates. I think education certificates can be used through NFTs in order to authenticate them, whether it is valid or not. With respect to education loans, I'm not sure if I entirely understand that you ask, but you can ping me offline because it's a two steps away that we are talking about. It's a use case and then follow.
Got it. One last question. Which will be the first sector that can disrupt with the DeFi technology?
Financial services. It's already being disrupted. It's at more than $1 trillion market.
So thank you so much, Rakesh. I think we are almost done with the session. The time is over. Thank you so much for this. It was a really interesting session. Like learned a little bit new about a new topic. So thank you very much. And I am seeing in the chat that the people also enjoyed it a lot. So we'll end the session here now. Bye everyone.
Thank you, everyone.